And thank you.
Thank you.
So let me just change screens again once more. And so, as I mentioned, developing collaboration is our topic of the module this evening with Laura Valles and Associates. And just to remind you, next week will be Speaker Congressman Mike Garcia. Decision making will be the topic. And so let me just change screens once more, and I'm going to introduce our speaker to you. So Laura Valles and Associates is a Los Angeles-based consulting firm founded and led by Laura Valles. Since 2007, LVA has partnered with a range of organizations across California with a focus on Los Angeles County, including nonprofits, government organizations, public-private partnerships, and philanthropic organizations to achieve social justice and systemic change. Laura's commitment to community and social justice was born from her experience growing up in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles. As the daughter of Mexican immigrants, Laura encountered firsthand how racism, disinvestment, and classism impacted her family and the broader community. Her dedication to addressing these conditions informs her role as a community and organizational development consultant, strategic planner, collaborative community facilitator, coach, and capacity builder. Over the last 30 years, Laura has partnered with individual leaders and nonprofit, philanthropic, and governmental organizations to improve the lives of children, families, and communities across the state of California. Laura is fully biliterate in English and Spanish, and it's my pleasure to welcome her to our Module 2 this evening.
Great. So thank you, Tracy, and hello, everyone. Really happy to be here today and really happy to spend the next 2 hours with you. I know you could be doing other things, but really hoping that you had a chance to maybe eat something and maybe you have your favorite beverage next to you as we spend the next 2 hours together talking about developing collaboration. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to share a presentation that I'll walk you through over the next 2 hours. And as Tracy said, the way that I designed this session is for it to be really interactive. And so we're going to be using breakouts. We'll have an opportunity to use the chat as well. And so while I will be presenting on developing collaboration, I do know that you all have a lot of knowledge and expertise around collaboration as well. And so the design for today is really meant to also tap into all of your knowledge and expertise so that we can learn from one another. So let me pull this up. And Tracy, can you see it right now? Okay, let me put it in presentation mode. All right. So, so the first thing that I want to do is, I know Tracy just walked through a little bit of about my bio, but I wanted to share a little bit about the experience that shapes my own experience around developing collaboration, because it definitely influences the way that I think about all the necessary ingredients that we need to have in place in order to be able to develop high functioning collaboration. And so my own trajectory from LA to the Bay Area, where I lived 11 years, spans kind of the following focus areas. So I spent a lot of time working as a community organizer in the San Francisco Bay Area. As part of the work that I did as a community organizer, there was a really strong focus on figuring out how do you really build collaborations that can be impactful, that can be effective, that are really connected, and that are really working towards a common purpose. And so community organizing was like the first place that I started to learn about how to do that. I also did a lot of work in Sacramento in the public policy arena, working on everything from immigration to higher education. And so that was another place where I got to see how do you bring stakeholders together that are working kind of in a different realm so that they can also do that kind of work. Then I moved into social work and became a social worker, and so got to work across the state, helping to establish collaboratives. And then spent a lot of years here in LA as a community builder and capacity builder, where part of my role was both around how to build collaboration, how to facilitate collaboratives, but also how to build the capacity of individuals and organizations so that they're able to participate in collaboratives in a more effective way. And then as a consultant and coach, that's where I've been spending a lot of my time now since 2007. And then the last piece is I've been involved with Best Start since First 5LA first established Best Start as an initiative. My first role was as a supervising facilitator for all of the partnerships across LA County. And then in particular, I worked a lot with Metro. I got a chance to engage a little bit with Lancaster. And then I've done some work with Southeast LA as well. And so I'm really familiar with Best Start and all of what you all are trying to accomplish together. And so what I want to do now is get to know you all a little bit. And so using the chat, if you could share your name, your organizational affiliation, and also just very briefly your experience developing and or participating in collaboratives, right? And so you could be, for example, leading a collaborative through your own organization. And so that would be great to know, or maybe you sit on 5 or 6 different collaboratives. So that would be a wonderful thing to learn about you as well. So we'll take a couple of minutes for you to do that. And Luz, I see a message from you. We worked at Hathaway many moons ago, so hello.
I worked at Hathaway too.
Oh my God, did you really?
I was sorry, I was at the
Small world.
residential facility.
So did I.
It's a small world.
Oh my
It's a small
gosh, my
world.
mind's blown right now.
We'll talk after. I'm so sorry, everybody.
Lucy, you're on mute. Lucy, I think you're trying to say something. Lucy.
No?
Lucy, you're on mute.
Well, I've been on mute all this time. No, I was trying
Yeah.
to tell Laura. I was thinking about when you were mentioning Sacramento. I remember when you were at the FRC, you know, when you and Gabby took the girls group up to Sacramento.
Yeah.
So yeah, we go way, way back.
Way
So
back.
it's good to see you. Very good to see you.
So, so I'll give you another minute, your name, organizational affiliation, and then your experience developing and or participating in collaboratives. And I see Donna, her life is collaborating both in government and in the nonprofit community. I hear that. And Lisa, you're involved in a lot of collaboratives as well. Awesome. See, so much experience. You all participate in lots of collaboratives. So it'll be great as we go through the next 2 hours together as I share sort of what I've learned in terms of how do you build effective collaboratives, how you think about the collaboratives that you're sitting in as well, and where they're really strong. So what are those best practices, but also where they might be strengthened, right? As you kind of maybe parlay some of what I share with you today in terms of the spaces that you're sitting in. Maria Teresa, so you're a firm, SBCC. I know SBCC, Max, LA Care, Best Start, awesome. Great, so I'll give you another 30 seconds and then we'll, but keep typing if I didn't get to read yours, just so that we can keep scanning all of the experience that's in the virtual room together. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to move on to just walking through what, you know, the objectives are for these 2 hours with all of you. And so there are 4 objectives that I identified for today. The first is that I want to introduce you to a working definition for collaboration. Again, this is based on my experience and the lens that I bring to this work, given my own background and the work that I've been doing. The second is for you to be able to describe the goals, benefits, and levels of collaboration. The third objective is to identify the conditions necessary for effective collaboration. And I'm sure, we all have been in collaboratives that are really strong, successful, effective. And then sometimes we're in collaboratives that end up not working as effectively. And so we want to be able to tease that out. And then the last objective is to apply some key action steps for building effective collaboration. So in terms of the agenda, after I kind of walk through this overview, we'll then move into a conversation about levels of collaboration. Then we'll probably take a break right after that, just very short, 2 to 3 minutes for a stretch break. But then we'll come back and talk about how do you develop a collaborative, and then we'll spend some time doing some reflection, and then move to a closing. So as I shared just a second ago, this is based on my experience. And the reason that I really wanted to harness all of your experience is that you're going to have opportunities to share both in small group and large group. And that'll be really important because we really want this to be an interactive conversation around how do we develop collaboration. Sometimes we're the leads as we're trying to establish collaboratives, and then other times we're participants. But in either role, it's really important for us to be able to help support the space that gets created so that it can meet its ultimate aim and purpose. And so that's really, we want to make sure that we harness as we spend this time together. And so the first thing that I want to do is actually, we're going to move you into small group conversations. You're going to have a quick 5 minutes. But what we want you to do in these small group conversations is for you to share with one another. First, why is collaboration important? And then the second is, what is your definition of collaboration? And you have an opportunity to share that in your small groups for those 5 minutes. And then we'll bring you back and we'll have you do a very brief popcorn out reflection. So not every group will get to go, but we want to just hear a few highlights from your conversation in your small group. And so again, why is collaboration important? And what is your definition of collaboration? And a member of the Children's Bureau team will be in each of the small groups with you. And so they're going to move you to groups probably now.
Yes, I am setting up the rooms as we speak, just trying to make sure that they're even, but I'm going to open them.
All right, so I think, is everyone back?
It's giving them 50 seconds. So some might come back early, but they are being closed.
Awesome.
Hey, Kim, how are you? Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Tracey. I'm good. Trying to stay warm.
Yeah. It's devilishly cold up here. I got up the other morning, it was 27 degrees. I was like, that's not right. And they've got 22 seconds left.
Wait, you
on
just
a
gave us
roll and
whiplash.
on a roll. And we got the boot.
We were ready. You gave us whiplash.
I know. My team was on a roll and it was like,
I know, it's never enough time. I know, 5 minutes, it feels cruel, huh?
that was just mean. We were just getting warmed up.
We just got through the first question. We didn't even get to the second one.
Okay, so that's good, actually, that's
Yeah.
fine. But I am curious about just a highlight from each group about your conversation about why is collaboration important. So maybe we'll just share out on that. So I am gonna arbitrarily, actually, I'm gonna ask Tracey if you could name your staff and then have somebody from each of those groups report out.
Sure. So Sylvia, our director.
Okay, I can start with ours. And again, you know that I'm not competitive at all or anything like that, but I did really have a really cool team. And I don't know if it's the best team, but it was a really good team. Again, not competing at all. But No, I think these questions, Laura, really incite a lot of I think energy. Like and correct me, everybody from my team. Like we got really energized as we were going through this because I think here in the Antelope Valley, we're always looking about how to make our community better, how to improve it and ourselves to be better for our community. But a few of the things that we got out of our group was really about building our toolboxes with resources and being able to share that and really emphasizing that the community are the experts and they bring this expertise that we can all learn from. And that's what collaboration does, right? It brings knowledge to all of us. Also, just growing the network and networking is so key to collaboration. And then also realizing that as you collaborate, the type of outreaching or the type of impact that you do really affects everybody in a different way or at a different level. And then really talking about how that impact that we want to bring, not reinventing the wheel, really keeping it simple and saying like, hey, if this worked for you, this could work for our community, and really sharing that information was really a lot about what we saw as collaboration.
Awesome, thank you. How about the next group?
And Stephanie?
Well, Sylvia, I think my group was the best group. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But we did have some similar answers. Not reinventing the wheel, as well as networking, is very important. Another thing that someone had mentioned that stuck with me was two heads. Two heads is essentially better than one. And we're just answering the first question right now.
Yes,
correct?
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was pretty much it for my group.
Awesome. How about the next?
Darrell? Darrell, are you?
Hopefully, yeah, there I go. Hopefully I won't freeze on you, but
And did she just freeze on us?
Yeah.
quickly, our group was just out at
Is there somebody else?
cyberspace, and we were
I think we might want to ask somebody else. Darrell, you're freezing. Did you want to pick somebody else? Somebody else on Darrell's team?
Yeah, who else can?
Because you keep freezing.
So can we get one volunteer from that team just to share out some brief highlights?
Sure, I can go. This is Gabriella. I was on the team.
Can't do this to me today.
So can you guys hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So we had some good conversation on question number one. So Bernadette said that collaboration offers fuller perspective, making better solutions to address some of the issues going on in our community and with some of our families. Let's see, connecting systems and networks, better able to connect the people we serve across these systems. Funding can go further as well. So we're not utilizing our funding to provide, the same type of whether services or outreach events or whatever it is, but collaboration can make me, reach a larger audience, and, our money can go further that way.
Awesome.
I don't know if I missed anything, if anybody wants to jump in from the group.
And Christine.
I would say the only thing I wanted to add was that we did mention that it provides a way for us to get to our designated destination quicker.
Right.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Christine's our last colleague.
Yeah, my group basically had a lot of the same. Someone in our group did also say 2 or 3 heads are better than one, and that we just learn from each other and that we have a common goal that we're working towards. And so that gives us more power. And also someone brought up the importance of communication in a collaborative as well.
Awesome. And that was all 5 groups, right, Tracy? Yeah, awesome. So thank you for that. And I think it was just so great to hear just those brief highlights from your conversations. I can only imagine if you had had more time, you actually would be delivering this 2-hour session instead of me, because we're in perfect alignment, I think, in terms of just the way that we think about collaboration and why it's important. One thing that I want to invite you to do is actually just take a minute for yourselves to write down what is your definition of collaboration. And the reason I'm going to have you do that is because I'm going to share my definition, but it'll be nice to see kind of how your own definition matches to, aligns to, or differs from the definition I'm going to offer you. So take a minute to do that. Okay, so I have another 20 seconds. Okay. All right. So what I want to do now is I first want to share just some common definitions for collaboration. And the reason that I want to start here is that these are the definitions that we might be most familiar with, or that, you know, you all might have already encountered in your own work or as part of, you know, the Best Start work that you're doing. And so these could be working definitions for you. I know that they were for me for a really long time. And so the first definition actually just comes from the dictionary, right? So it's the most common definition, right? It's two or more people or organizations who are working together to complete a task or achieve a goal, right? And so that's very straightforward. The second definition comes from what's called the community toolbox. And so for me as a community organizer and a community builder, the community toolbox is a resource that I still use, but used most often when I was first beginning to do the work around community building. And so the definition that's offered here is around bringing the appropriate people together in constructive ways with good information, creating authentic visions and strategies for addressing the shared concerns of the organization or community. And then the third is, I'm sure you all are familiar with collective impact. And so that really kind of is kind of on trend still in terms of the way that a lot of organizations, collaboratives, partnerships, et cetera, kind of assemble themselves to do this work. But the definition that's shared by them is the commitment of a group of important actors from different sectors to a common agenda for solving a specific social problem. Right. And so just maybe one or two of you, what's one thing that you notice across the trajectory of these three definitions? So what's one thing that jumped out at you as I walked us through those? And you can just go off mic if you want to share.
Well,
This
I
is Lisa.
saw-
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, what I saw was everything, it's not just working together, but you have a common goal. You're working towards something, you know, and that I think is, well, that's what I wrote too, you know, was working as a team, you know, to accomplish a desired goal.
Great, thank you. So one thing that I want to share before I even share the definition that I operationalize in terms of how I think about collaboratives or developing collaboratives is, for me, it's really important to be clear about guiding values, right? Because if you notice, I'm going to go back, right? One thing that you might notice from the three definitions here is kind of a specification around who gets brought together. The first dictionary definition is just two or more people. And then the second one is around the appropriate people. And then the third is around a group of important actors, right? So it's getting more and more specific around kind of the who. And so in order to get clear about the who, sometimes and oftentimes it's super helpful to start with a set of guiding values, right? And so, for example, I shared that I do a lot of work with Best Start Metro. the way that they've been able to build a really strong partnership is that their guiding values are the North Star for the way that they do their work and they bring folks together. So in my own lens, my own work, my life, the guiding values that really influence the way that I help think about how to develop collaboratives starts with this, right? So for me, it's around social justice and social change. It's about race equity. It's about diversity, inclusion, and access, being relationship-based, and mutual support and collectivism, right? And so being clear about those values helps inform the kinds of collaboratives that I'm a part of and the kinds of collaboratives that I help to establish, right? There are other types of collaboratives. You could have a work collaborative and what have you. But for me, the focus is around this, just like the work around Best Start is focused around this as well. And so for you all, you have your own values. And so getting clear about that is a really important starting place. The second thing is to think about what is the goal of collaboration, right? You all identified that as you were sharing just those very brief highlights of your conversation. But in my lens, the goal of collaboration is to bring individuals, agencies, organizations, and community members together in an atmosphere of support to systematically solve existing and emerging social issues that could not easily be solved by one group alone, right? And so this is the goal itself. It's not the definition of collaboration, but it's the animus. It's what helps animate why I'm a part of certain collaboratives and why I help establish collaboratives in a very specific kind of structure with a very specific kind of purpose, right? And so for you all, again, getting clear about what is the goal of that collaboration becomes that starting place. So with those two pieces in mind, then the working definition that I have for collaboration is the following. So collaboration is a process of participation through which a diverse cross-section of people, groups, and organizations work together to co-create a shared vision, mission, policy, systems, and structural change strategies to address a shared agenda and ultimately achieve long-lasting social transformation. Right. So in my frame of reference, the reason that we come together is that we want to make sure that, as you identified, right, that we're working towards a common purpose, that it isn't just, although this is important, it isn't just about sharing information. That's valuable. But if that's the endpoint, then that collaboration from my frame of reference is not going to achieve the kind of social change that I believe is really important for us to live in a world that is good for children, families, and communities, right? And so for me, this is why this is the working definition that helps guide the way that I think about how do we develop collaboratives. For Best Start, that is the purpose of Best Start as well, right? Is to come together to engage in systems change. And so that means really elevating those pieces that are about co-creating all these pieces together. And as you shared, right, is, you know, if we think about community being the driver, right, and really wanting to center power in community, then this kind of working definition really helps us think about how do we develop collaboratives that are going to help us to get to that aim. And so I want to pause here for 1 second, and you know, you can go off mic, but any highlights in terms of your own definition? I asked you to define collaboration for yourself. And then this working definition, just anything that kind of just piqued for you, any curiosity, or was there alignment, or maybe there's a lot of difference in our definitions. Just curious about what's come up for you as you look at this definition. And so maybe one or two of you, if you want to go off mic and share. Any reflections?
All right, so I'm going to say something. It's so the definitions were, I'm going to say, basically in line with what I thought, except you were very specific. So if you take your definitions and make them general, then it's the same. But what popped out at me is the part where you mentioned guiding values, because I've been a part of a lot of collaborations and they don't all work. And so I think in an effort to bring like diverse opinions in the room, that I may have ignored the guiding values, because it seems like what actually keeps the group together and makes it productive.
Thank you for your reflection. And one thing that I want to offer is sometimes I feel like I'm a doctor coming in to work with organizations or collaboratives, and it's for the very precise reason that you're sharing, right? The collaborative isn't working. They're not sure how to diagnose why isn't it working? Why are we not getting along? Why aren't we impactful? And a lot of times it comes down, right, to this piece around values and being unclear really about the goal. And so being able to just get to that, think of it as the foundation to the house, getting clear about that is really an important place that is not a one and done. It's a piece that we have to come back to. It's like a refresh on a regular basis, you know, like a good infusion of good blood to help the organism work in an effective way moving forward. And why? Because we're always getting fresh blood into our collaboratives, right? It's not a stagnant entity. And so that's why I offer those two pieces as a way to think about how do we define collaboration, and how do we not assume we're even on the same page in terms of our definition of what collaboration is, right? So with that, we now want to move into another small group conversation. We've only increased it by 1 minute. You're gonna have 6 minutes. So I know it's kind of like a power round. But the idea here is I want you to take a few minutes in small group to think about the following 3 questions. What are your reflections on the working definition? So I know we didn't have enough time for you all to share, but there might have been another aha for others of you. And so I want you to at least share that in your small group. What works or worked well in the collaboratives you've been a part of? And so really you want to start from that strengths-based kind of point of view. And then what are or were some of the challenges you experienced in the collaboratives you've been part of?
17.
You mentioned one, but
23. Oh,
definitely want to give you a chance in small group to chat about that. And so we're going to have 6 minutes and we'll move you into groups probably in a second or so.
And 10 seconds left.
I know.
These 6 minutes zip by, don't they?
Oh my God.
This
At least
is
I
not
forewarned
okay.
my group
This is
so they wouldn't
not
get,
okay.
yeah.
I need
at least
my neck
group-
brace.
Yeah, at least my group didn't get whiplash. I said, they getting ready to snatch us in 15, 14, 13 seconds, y'all. Get ready, get ready. It's about to go down.
It's anxiety provoking when you're like, wait, we want to have so much stuff to say.
I know, sorry. But it's better something than nothing. That's what I always say. So-
Exactly.
Laura, I don't think we have a
Clearly, this
facilitator.
is a talking group. Clearly, this group needs 10 minutes at least for each breakout. I'm just saying.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Minimum.
Well, so
Wait, before you start, Laura, I don't think we have a facilitator in our group.
okay. So why don't we start with your group? I just wanted to hear one reflection, just very
not what I
briefly
meant.
from your group. It could be on any of those 3 questions, either reflection on the definition, what works well, or what were some of the challenges. So just a brief reflection.
Okay, well, I'll pull one out. You guys feel free to jump in if it's the wrong one. So we did mention that that you have to have the common goal. A lot of times the person who brings the group together will have the goal and then try and push that on the group when that's not actually a collaboration. So there was one of our team members wrote your thing down, but it was like co-create is what we came out to. So if it's not a co-creation, it's actually not a collaboration. It's a work group. So.
Mhm. That's great. Thank you. All right, I lied. One more group. So my curiosity is piqued. Which group wants to share just briefly a highlight?
Well, one of the highlights we came up with in our group, and I'm gonna talk quick before I freeze. One of the things we came up with was that the value has to be talked about. We need to know, are we operating from the same core values? Are we going in the same direction? And then not just do it once, because people come and the turnover is great. So when new people come in, are we reestablishing this is our core, these are our values, this is why we do and what we're doing, and this is the direction we go? Are we going over that enough in order to make sure the collaboration stays on point? That works. Even and diversity, Gabriella brought up in our group, because we sit on various collaborative meetings and groups together, we notice that when there is a diversity, even though it's a diversity, somehow that seems to work, but we still have a collective value, and it's been working.
Yeah.
So that was some of the highlights that we came up with.
Beautiful. Thank you. So I wanted to build on that, because I am guessing with the other groups that we didn't get to hear from you, but I'm guessing you all would have filled in all of the rest of this detail, but just so that we're on a common page, right? So some of the benefits of collaboration are the shared knowledge, right? So you all had said either 2 heads are better than 1, 3 heads are better than 1, for sure. Like more heads are better than 1, because we definitely are able to access more and better ideas when we have that diversity in our space. And it's not just racial diversity, but it's experiential diversity, right? It's every form of diversity that we can think of really helps us really get to ideas that are going to help create that long lasting change. So we need that in a good collaborative. The other is, being able to really dissect the issue or problem better, right? So if we're trying to solve COVID and we only have doctors, but we don't have nurses, we don't have patients, we don't have everybody down the line that plays a role somehow in addressing that, then we're only going to address one tiny piece of the problem, and it's really going to be incomplete. And so that's what we need in all the collaboratives that we are part of or that we create. Greater impact, so that's another benefit, right? And connects to that idea of co-designing, but it's being able to have that shared ownership over solving the problems, right? So I don't just own a part of the solution, but we collectively do. And that is really important, so that we're all kind of carrying our equal weight as we're trying to build an effective collaboration. And then having shared roles and responsibilities. It isn't just one person's role to recruit members or to create the agendas or to facilitate the meetings. Really, there's a sharing of roles and responsibilities, and that is important. The diversity around like skills and abilities, so having those skill sets and knowledge that help round us out. And it really creates an improved ability to address structural racism and achieve racial justice. So that's another benefit. Having a multifaceted approach, those diverse strategies again, and in particular, right, focusing on things like community organizing, community mobilization, policy change, right, all the systems change work that you're doing, that's all really a core part. And then having transparency, that's a real benefit when we start to be a part of or build effective collaboration. It's really being able to openly acknowledge and begin to address or eliminate turf issues that oftentimes get in the way, right? So that's another benefit. And I've seen this with collaborations where they might have started from a place of competition and then got to a place as they became stronger collaboratives where they realized that they could be of support to one another to help sustain not just the work of the collaboration, but actually the work of each individual organization as well. And so that's when you know you're working in a really high functioning collaborative space. And so just quickly, I'll give you 30 seconds if you want to write anything in the chat in terms of any additional benefits of collaboration. Maybe you discussed something in your group that I didn't highlight. So I want to make sure that it gets captured here. So feel free to type that in the chat. And just for time, I'm going to move on then to the challenges of collaboration. So multifaceted like a diamond, right? There are the pros and the cons. And I think really understanding these pieces helps us self-diagnose, if you will, right, as we're working in collaboration with others, but also figure out how to put the right pieces in place so that we can help strengthen the collaboratives that we're a part of. And so some of the most common challenges that we encounter are leadership, right? And so having uneven participation and leadership in a collaborative is a very common issue that comes up. Oftentimes that's, you know, an organization or an individual might get inducted to be the convener of a collaboration, but doesn't actually have the knowledge base to do that work. And so then the collaboration falters, or you have folks from different sectors who are participating, but not everyone is stepping up to the plate. And so all of a sudden that leadership isn't being provided to the collaboration in a very even way. And so that really impacts the way that we do our work. The other is being unclear about our roles and responsibilities. We make a lot of assumptions when we build collaboratives, and we assume a thing is going to get taken care of by somebody, but we've never clearly defined that from the beginning. And so that's an important starting place. Oftentimes what I do with collaboratives is I create charters right from the very beginning that define very clear roles and responsibilities, that also define leadership roles so that folks are really clear. It becomes a standing document, right? And it helps really set the stage no matter who comes and goes. The other is around divergence and conflict. So having a lot of diversity is key, but with that come a lot of diverse points of view, right? And that's what we want. But oftentimes what happens for most of us is we interpret that divergence of ideas as conflict. And it isn't. Oftentimes when you facilitate, you want those diverse ideas in the place, right? You don't want everybody to be thinking in the same box, but we get uncomfortable with that. And then all of a sudden we see that as conflict. And then there are other instances where there is actual conflict, right? So there could be power imbalances. It could be the organization that is supporting a collaborative maybe is playing a greater role than they should in that collaborative space. And so that might create a power imbalance. Or there might be conflict between two people or between small groupings of people inside the collaborative. And so that's a real tension that exists. A lot of times there are, and this is very common as we're trying to have conversations about racial equity and anti-Blackness and really wanting to get to a better place, we're fearful of having those courageous conversations. And so those sit just under the surface in a lot of the collaborative spaces. And so really being able to step into that is crucial. And then the other is turf issues, right? So on the positive side, we're able to be more transparent and address them. On the flip side, oftentimes we're scared of being very direct about needing to address turf issues as they arise, right? Or to address like where might folks actually have conflict, or are there turf issues that people are walking in with? And so needing to really be clear about that is really important. Otherwise, it could pose a challenge to the collaboration's health. The next piece is around time and resources. It is very intensive to support a collaborative. And oftentimes we need to have skilled facilitation to help support these conversations. A lot of times that's also why I get brought in, is a collaborative has been meeting for a while. And as it turns out, maybe they haven't even been creating clear agendas that have clear results on them. And so the collaboration has faltered. And so that facilitation is important. Oftentimes too, what happens is when we don't have additional kind of skill facilitation, is a collaboration might have a shared purpose, but what the collaboration ends up doing as a default is only networking as the only thing that brings them together, or their agendas are around just presentation, right? So people present what their individual organizations are doing, and the actual facilitation around how do we get to a common agenda and what are the goals and the strategies that we need to outline, that part doesn't get facilitated because there isn't that skill set in the group. And so that's one piece. The second is just having limited resources or lack of willingness to share existing resources. Often when I work with collaboratives, ask like, what are you each going to pony up? There's an expectation that you might get something, right, from being part of the collaborative, maybe, you know, a stipend of some kind, but what does each partner or organization pony up as well as part of participation in that collaborative? Because sustainability is the thing that can definitely kill a collaborative. And the need for coordination and admin support is really crucial, right? That's a very important role that we often take for granted. And then the need for ongoing capacity building, right? Especially if we have a sponsor agency who's supporting the collaborative, oftentimes what happens is we think of the knowledge that needs to be created as static. But over time, as we're needing to build more complex agendas for the change we're trying to create, we need to keep building our skills, and that the skills of the entire collaborative. And it isn't just residents. So oftentimes we make the mistake of thinking, oh, we need to build capacity of the parents and the residents. It's for everybody, right? Even for institutions, for organizations, particularly as we do systems change work or we're doing community change work, is helping them understand what it means to move from a traditional service provider framework to a framework that is about systems change. It isn't a one-for-one. There's some capacity that needs to be built around that. Then the next piece is around just a common challenge, the collaborative structure, not having clear values, principles, and commitments from everyone that's involved, being unclear about your decision-making processes and your membership, right? Because this is often an issue, like who gets to go? Well, this person only attended one meeting. That's often like a thing that comes up, but it's because none of that was really spelled out in the beginning. And then just decision-making takes more time. And so being very clear about even how you're facilitating decision-making processes so that you can help be effective and efficient is important. Otherwise, it becomes a real challenge to the collaboration. And then the last is just around communications and trust. A real strength of collaboration is that you get to build relationships and trust, but the flip side of that is that it could also be a breeding ground sometimes for mistrust and lack of relationships. And that happens when we don't intentionally build the time to build conscious relationships, right, with one another about why we're doing this work. And so that is super important, and having clear communication on a regular ongoing basis. One of the most common conflicts is actually a conflict around communication. So it could be, for example, you're a sponsor organization, you know you need to make certain decisions about funding, or there's a certain dollar amount that might be available, let's say, but you don't communicate that out, and then you expect the collaboration to have some kind of plan developed without that key piece of information. And so then it becomes a conflict, right? And it stalls the process. So that transparent communication is super important. So in the chat, if you are so inclined, it would be great if there are any other challenges to collaboration. If you could write those in the chat, that would be really great. And it's now 6:05. So what I want to do is I want to just give us a 2-minute stretch break. This will also be a chance for you to do any reflection. And when we come back, we'll launch right into the next piece. And then I'll open it up to see if anybody had any reflections on anything that I shared just now. So we'll take a 2-minute break at 6:05 moment to see if there's anyone in the group that wants to share, a reflection on anything that I shared in the last 2 slides. Anything that jumped out at you, and aha, anything like curious about? Nope. Okay. All right. So, all right. So what I want to do now is talk about the levels of collaboration. So how many of you can use your emoji or your hand? How many of you are familiar with this visual, the collaborative levels? Is there anybody here? Okay, so I see 1 or 2 hands up. Okay, good. So I'm glad it's new to many of you. So when we think about collaboration, we use the term, but it does mean different things. So there are different levels of collaboration. And so understanding this helps you also be clear about what is this body attempting to do, right? So that you're clear, your expectations for that collaborative are the right fit or the right size, right? So when we think about collaboration, there are these 5 different levels. So at a very low level of commitment and low level of maybe purpose or goal is a collaborative that comes together to have conversation, right? They may not necessarily be working on a specific aim, right? So that's not necessarily why they're coming together. It could be like, for example, support group, right? Where it's kind of a collaborative space and you're coming together, but really the purpose is conversation. It's to share, it's to be in relationship with one another. But you can come and go. And so that commitment isn't really a high expectation. And so that is legitimate, right? That is a collaboration. The second is then the next level, which is you're wanting to kind of maybe communicate out specific kinds of messages, right? So there's a purpose for you to come together. There's a slightly higher level of commitment for you all coming together. And you may have a slightly higher purpose or goal that brings you together, right? So you're wanting to maybe message something, right? If there's something that brought you together and you're wanting to make sure that a wider audience hears what you're wanting to communicate out. The third is around coordination, right? I've worked in the nonprofit sector for a really long time. And so I know like service delivery is like a super important piece of the work that we do, especially in the nonprofit sector. And a lot of times the downfall for the work that we do is that we're not coordinated, either internally in the organization or externally with our partners. And so we might form a collaborative simply because what we want to do is we want to coordinate the services that we're providing, right? And so there's definitely a higher level of commitment and a higher purpose or goal, right? It's definitely that coordination of the services that we're providing. And then the next level is cooperation, right? So now we're looking at a higher level of commitment and a higher purpose. And really the idea here is we want to move from just that coordination to figuring out how do we create cooperative agreements with one another so that we can really expand the work that we're doing in a way that's going to be even more impactful, right? And so that's that next level. It might require a bit more maybe alignment or integration in terms of the work that individually or collectively we're trying to do, right? And then the last level is then the highest form of collaboration, right? Which aligns to the definition that I shared. But this really requires a really high level of commitment and a high level of purpose or goal, right? And so we're working towards this common purpose. And so for you all, what I want you to do now is, I'm gonna walk you through the detail a little bit more, and then I'm gonna ask you a question. So for those 5 levels of collaboration and their characteristics, this is essentially what we're looking at. So when we're doing kind of the first level, really what we're looking at is just kind of that networking, right? We're aware of the organization, loosely defined roles, there's little communication, all decisions are made kind of independently, right? So that's that lowest level. The second around that cooperation is providing information to each other. There's slightly more defined roles, more formal communication. In the coordination, we're sharing information and resources. Roles are more clearly defined. There's some shared decision-making that's happening at this level. For the fourth, we're looking at it more like that kind of coalition kind of structure, but we're sharing resources and all members may have a vote in decision-making. And then for that last level, what we're looking at is members belong to one system. So there's like a common identity that's been formed at this last level, frequent communication, and there's mutual trust. And then really what we're looking at is consensus is reached on all decisions, right? So there isn't the sponsoring agency isn't making all the decisions on our behalf, or it isn't like 1 or 2 kind of cult of personality leaders who are making the decisions on the collaborative's behalf. But really collectively, we've all made the decisions together. And so there's that consensus. So this is a little bit more of the detail as it relates to those 5 levels. And so what I'd like to do now is have you in the chat think about maybe one of the collaboratives that you're a part of, and have you in the chat share which level best describes that collaborative and why. So think about one collaborative that you're in And which level best describes that collaborative and why? If you could type that in the chat, that'd be great.
Laura, is it possible to go back so we can see those
Yes,
those
ma'am.
categories? Thank you.
So Lisa, yours are levels 3 and 4. Awesome. Doral, 3 and 4. So a lot of 3s and 4s. So your collaboratives are at the kind of sharing information and resources, and then or right, like for example, all members have a vote in decision making, sharing ideas and resources, etc. Right. So 1, 2, 2 2s. And great. So we'll give you another 20 seconds. And so the invitation here, right, is, you know, depending on what you were hoping, right, that collaborative structure was going to accomplish, is to think about what might be some building blocks to put in place to help it get to a level 5 collaboration, right, if that's the intent or the purpose. And so that's an opportunity to really think about that. And so with that, if I could move, yeah. So what I want to do now is to share some of the conditions that are necessary for a collaborative to be successful at the level 5 area, right? And so the first piece is around that leadership. And so what we want to make sure that we do is that any leadership or conveners that are supporting our collaborative structures, that they have that competency in communication, in meeting facilitation, in negotiation, and in networking, right? Because these are some of the areas that we often get tapped on the most to help provide for collaboratives, particularly when we hit those little bumps in the road. And so being able to have that skill set is really important. And that doesn't mean it's just the one person, right? It could be a team, but making sure that we round out that skill set is really important. And then we build on each leader's skill set as different situations present themselves. The next is that we want to secure sustainable financial resources. And I know that's an obvious point, right? Where often a big issue is like, how do we sustain this work? But starting a collaborative with $0 is way more challenging than starting a collaborative with some funding secured to help support the work longer than like a 3-month time frame, right? It takes time to build relationships and trust. And so needing to have sort of just that facility related to the resources helps you be able to do that groundwork. The third is around really making outcomes matter, right? Being very clear about the end goal on a regular basis, coming back to it every meeting is really important so that those outcomes really are what are guiding you. They're giving you energy. They're helping you focus less on what do I perhaps individually, my organization need, and more what do we collectively need to do, that is really a way to help folks do that. The next is around setting high expectations, right? Expecting the best from the people that are part of the collaborative. And that's important, is setting that a high bar. And as a group, identifying leaders for the collaboration who are open-minded, willing to share leadership and empower others. Oftentimes what will happen, and I'm sure you probably bumped into this, is there are some people who really love to take the mic, right? And so there's an agreement that I often use. I learned this from a young person actually at a meeting I facilitated, but it's just a simple agreement around like, finish your sentence, not your paragraph. And so the idea being that no one person gets the mic for extended periods of time, and that instead we really create a level playing field where folks are feeling really empowered to share and to participate and to share leadership and power in that space, right? And so that's really important in terms of just leadership expectations. The next is around mutual benefits and buy-in, right? Having those shared values and principles, making sure that we, as I said before, dedicate time for relationship building and trust. It isn't just at the beginning of meetings, but also figuring out, I know right now we're in COVID, but figuring out ways to dedicate time just for building connection that isn't about the work is equally as important as taking time to focus on the work, right? And so that goes without saying, and yet it is an ingredient that we often leave out. Having a shared vision and mission, and the operative word here is shared, right? So it isn't just the vision and mission for the convener bringing the collaborative together, but it's really, we co-created that vision and the mission, and that is then what really helps us connect back at the heart level each time to what the collaborative is doing. I talked about ongoing capacity building, but also providing technical assistance and support on a regular basis. You know, as collaboratives are asked to do new and better and different things, is making sure that they get the technical support they need to be able to do that. So for example, if you as a collaborative are going to create a strategic plan, but there isn't level knowledge building around how do you actually build a strategic plan, then maybe you have technical assistance and support provided to the collaborative so that everybody understands how do you actually build this thing, right? And so that's that piece there. Celebrating accomplishments, honestly, this doesn't happen enough. And so really embedding this on a regular basis, super, super important. And then moving beyond a backbone entity. So that's, again, collective impact. But with collective impact, there is kind of a top-down structure because you have a backbone entity. And oftentimes that backbone entity takes more of the leadership role over the collaborative's work. And so moving that so that there's more shared roles and responsibilities for convening, coordinating, and supporting the collaborative is critical. And then on the governance side, having good meeting design, really using adult learning principles and different participation formats, you know, and that means like, maybe you do small breakouts, maybe you do individual writing activities, maybe you do games, whatever it is, but just varying it up, just so that we also as adults tap into not just one side of our brain, right? Oftentimes we only go to the kind of logic side, but really tapping into creativity and intuition in our meetings is super important too, so that we can be really creative about the solutions. And then creating a collaborative charter, roles and responsibilities, membership, decision-making, attendance, all that super spelled out. Creating ongoing orientation for new members. This often happens with collaboratives. We'll orient members when we first establish it, and then we never do it again. And we don't really have a written document that we orient folks to, or we invite new members, they show up to a meeting, but there was no orientation process for that person. And they show up and then they're like on this page and we're on this page, and that then becomes challenging. So important there. And then having that transparent communication and communication guidelines. So I talked about like a group agreement around finish your sentence, not your paragraph, but creating those communication guidelines or ground rules to guide every meeting and really operationalizing them. Every meeting is really, really important. I never do a meeting if I don't have ground rules. And it really helps to norm a culture within the collaborative itself around how we communicate with one another. And so those are those conditions. And then some others here, right knowledge, skills, and behavior. really focus on gifts and talents, get to know what each person brings so that you can harness that. And intentionally recruit members of the collaborative that have a skill set that aligns to your purpose, but who aren't currently at the table, right? And so that's everyone from residents to elected officials, right? Whoever you need to have at your table. Sharing power, so learning to step aside, being clear about your personal interests. We don't do this often enough where we ask people to like take off a hat when they walk through the door so that those interests are docked somewhere else, right? And oftentimes those interests will creep up and then all of a sudden we don't know what we're arguing against, but it's because that isn't being made clear. And so that's really important. And shared decision-making, and then focus on access and inclusion, right? Making sure that as we think about our meeting spaces, we're attending to all the ways that people need to participate in our spaces. Having that unified approach. So really a plethora of strategies that are going to help us really move our agenda forward, and really focusing on those levels, policy, systems, and structural change. So it's not just about service delivery. Really, in some ways, I like to think about it as like, I want to work myself out of a job. And so that means if we're creating real systems change, the original reason that I had a job might not need to be there, right? Because we've really transformed the world we live in. And then shared understanding of issues and perspectives. So having an action plan with clear measurable goals and objectives is really important. Most collaboratives don't have that. They operate from like agenda to meeting minutes and like month to month, but having a clear plan really is important. Having your documentation and evaluation systems, and then really creating that space for open and honest communication, right? I know a lot of other consultants like myself who oftentimes will also come in. I'm a coach, and so I'll come in to coach the group because they've gotten to a point where they no longer can facilitate themselves. And so I'll come in to really facilitate a coaching process with the group to help bring some healing to the group. But if we can foster that open and honest communication from the very beginning, then it makes my job not necessary, right? And that's ideal. So one thing too here that I'll walk through is then if we take that formula, right, and we think about what are the steps for developing a collaborative, then these are essentially the 6 steps that we would take, right? We start with a unifying purpose. And so that means we're really clear about why we're needing this collaborative. And that's really important, is to just being reflective about why is this collaborative needed, right? Does it potentially already exist in our communities, in our county, right, in our city, et cetera, et cetera. Being very clear about anybody else that might be working on a similar issue, right? So if we find that there is still that gap, then creating a unifying purpose is going to help you be very clear about the value add that this collaborative is bringing, right? The second is then with that unifying purpose is actively recruiting and engaging folks who are going to then be instrumental in helping you achieve that purpose, right? And so it helps you kind of weed in and weed out, if you will, the people that are going to really be animated, energized, excited about being a part of this. And you want that level of excitement. What's hardest too is oftentimes there are folks who get assigned to a collaborative. They don't really want to be there, but it's part of their job description. And so it's really figuring out then, how do we make sure there's alignment between the purpose of the collaborative and the people who are sitting around our table, right? Because that's really important. And then when you convene the group, really take the time to develop that charter, right? It's slow going at first, but really it pays to take that time at the very beginning to figure out all of those details and to spell it out. And it's also where you will start to have some of the hard conversations about what's bringing you together, right? And how you want to share power, how you want to make decisions, all of those pieces, who gets to be a member, all of that gets clarified at the top. And then start to move forward with developing a strategic plan and a theory of change. Oftentimes, we might develop an action plan, and that's great. That might spell out the vision, the purpose, your goals, your strategies. But what we don't often do is develop a theory of change. And a theory of change is different, right? It really spells out what are the conditions that are creating the issue that we're trying to address. And from our perspective, what do we believe is the ultimate solution that's going to help us resolve this, right? And so that's your theory of change. And so really taking the time to build that out is important. It also helps you really to build relationships with one another in your collaborative, get to know one another's thinking, even understand one another's individual backgrounds that influence the way that they think. All of that is really critical to developing a strong collaborative. And then you move to implementation, to monitoring and evaluation. And so these are all critical pieces, right, in terms of being able to ensure that you are accomplishing the goals that you initially set out. And then the next piece is celebration and renewal. Here, you're taking that time very intentionally to do that. You want to celebrate on an ongoing basis, but you want to at least embed a kind of regular frequency for that celebration. And the renewal is about ensuring that people want to continue to be part of the collaboration, right? We sometimes are there for a short period of time because that's the contribution we can make. And sometimes the collaboration has outlived its purpose in our personal work or our lives, and that's okay. And then other times there's a next phase of the work, and we maybe even our collaboration has morphed, and we want to be able to make a conscious renewal or recommitment, right, to the work of the collaboration. And so this is that opportunity for you to do that. And so this really is kind of on a cycling basis. You want to do all of these steps on a regular so that you're able to infuse that kind of new energy, new perspectives, right? And that strong commitment to the work of the collaboration as it continues to move forward. And so I know that that's a lot. So what I want to do right now is I want to pause here and hear any reflections that you have, any questions, anything that's come up for you so far. After we do that, you're going to have an opportunity to move into small breakouts again, different set of questions, and you have a little bit more time this time. But I want to pause here just to see if there's anything that kind of caught your attention as I walk through those slides. So any thoughts, any reflections, any surprises?
Laura, there was a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Janie's asking, will we get a copy of this presentation? I'm not sure if this is a presentation that can be given out, or is that a?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna share it because this is intellectual property. So yeah, sorry. Does this? Yes.
Go ahead.
No,
Sorry,
you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know what, as we go through each one of the steps, I think what, at least for me, what it did personally is that in the different collaboratives I've ever been part of, it just kind of made me think about, did we have that step? And if we didn't have that step, was that the reason why some of the work wasn't successful or was successful? I think it really gives us a lot of just food for thought. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right, Sylvia. And I think as you work with collaboratives, right, you'll now, I think, be better able to assess, like, okay, there's a rub here. I wonder if the rub is this, right? And even just asking the question is going to help you get to a place of clarity around it, right? Because we don't know what we don't know, but now you'll better be able to name what might be happening, right? It could be off base, but at least it's the starting point for a conversation to unpack what is happening in the collaborative. Why are we stuck, or why are we not being effective or efficient?
I just wanted to also add, maybe it's ironic or maybe not, but in the Lancaster office, we are starting a new collaborative and relationship with Best Start. And so I've taken, I've taken a lot of notes, but I think the fact that we're actually in this shared journey together is really going to help perhaps us work smarter, what do they say, work smarter, not harder, and really align as we're kind of working, you know, and at each meeting, we're like, okay, what are the next steps, you know, to give us some of that format to be able to do this. So I think the timing of this is really perfect. And I really appreciate this as we're moving forward and starting. When you had shown the one about where are you, and I had sent Tracy a message, I'm like, where are we, right? Because we're in such the infancy stage. But I think that this will really be a nice segue for us as we work to develop this together.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And connecting to Adele, they added something. Can you expand the develop a charter part? So to your point as well, right? Because you're in that kind of early stage, this is a really wonderful opportunity to, in a written document, begin to clarify the following points, right? What is your purpose? What is your mission? What is your vision? So that might require some facilitated conversation, but what is your vision? What is Best Start's purpose, vision, goals, right? So that there's alignment to that. And then to begin to further spell out in that charter document, then who are our members? Who are the people that can participate in this collaborative? What are the expectations then for each of those members? So spelling out their roles and their responsibilities, right? So there might be folks who sit on the collaboration who are voting members, and there might be some who are only participants, so they come every once in a while. There are some that might sit on working groups, and so spelling out even what are the roles and functions of those work groups. So spelling out, right, all of those pieces is important. Also attendance requirements, like in a lot of the Best Start partnerships, this is actually like one of the early stumbling blocks, is they hadn't spelled out who could vote. And so what would happen is there'd be like folks who had been meeting for like 10 weeks straight, and then all of a sudden there'd be like one person who would show up brand new. And then they were like, okay, can that person vote? Well, we actually don't know because we never wrote it down anywhere and we never made a decision. So then they would like create all this chaos because it's like, well, they've only been to one meeting, whereas we've been to 10 meetings. And so spelling out, you know, membership, who gets to vote, like all of those pieces is part of what goes into your charter document. I reference Metro because I work really closely with them. But we created a charter when Best Start first started, so in 2009, and that charter is still in operation today. And one of the guiding pieces for them in that charter was that over 50% of their membership, voting membership, had to be parents and residents. And true to this day, the reason they've been able to build all these neighborhood action councils that they have, their neighborhood NLGs, they call them neighborhood leadership groups, is because that was spelled out in their charter, right? The expectations around that and the structure that they built, that's spelled out in their charter. So every part of what they do is in that charter document. And so it's what they go back to whenever there's like conflict or confusion or lack of clarity, they go back to that charter document as a way to bring them back to a shared understanding about why they were created and what they're trying to accomplish, right? And it's not that First Five hasn't shifted their own goals, because they have several times, but it's being able to kind of realign because they also then build a regular action plan, right? Every year as part of the work that they do, right? But the charter really is like it's like the Constitution, right? For a collaboration. And so that's what that document is. Any other reflections here before we move you into small groups? Or not just about this slide, but anything else actually? Anything about the conditions? All right. All right, so what we want to do is we're going to move you to breakouts, and we're going to have 10 minutes, is that right? Yeah, 10 minutes for you to go into your breakout sessions. And so what we want you to do in these small group conversations is there are 3 questions. So what are your greatest ahas or takeaways from today's session? what are you curious about, or where do you need greater understanding, right? Maybe something that I shared was too cursory and so it's not clear. And then the third is, what are some conditions for success or steps for developing a collaborative that you want to focus on? It could be around the best artwork, or it could be maybe another collaborative where maybe there's a pressing need. But any conditions for success or steps for developing a collaborative that you want to focus on in your own collaborative. Okay, so these are the 3 questions, and you're gonna have 10 minutes. And so it's 6, let's say you'll be back at 6:50.
Okay, bye now.
Okay, everybody's coming back.
I can't imagine having to go to class after this. I wouldn't have any brain cells left.
Long day.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Did you have a good conversation in your small groups? Yeah, I see some heads nodding.
Yeah.
All right, well, now I want to know about it. So
We took a vote, and we're hiring you back as our coach, everybody.
You're sweet. Thank you, Daryl. All right, so I definitely want to hear what you all talked about. I know we only have about 4 minutes, and I want to honor that so that you all can go home. Go home. You are in your house. Go have some dinner or relax or whatever you need to do. But highlights. So I'm gonna actually pick on people if I can. Wait, not everybody has their name. I'm gonna randomly pick on people. Let me see. Let's see. Adele, if you're here, if you want to share a highlight from your small group conversation. No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
There you go.
No, I have a microphone. So ahas. Okay. I guess what was common that we shared with each other was the fact that we are able to evaluate because we are so much part of a lot of collaboration and groups and coalitions in this community. And thankfully, with this type of information that we learned today, we have some gauge on where we're at and how we can really get there and meet that goal of being called as really a collaboration.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Let me see. How about, I don't see names on here. Let's see. How about Maria Teresa Rabaja? Any ahas, any reflections from your small group?
Yes, we talk about that we need to spell out everything that we need to do. We need to know, like your role, your responsibilities, and share ideas, and know the goal and everything needs to be spelled out.
Awesome, thank you. And then how about one more person? Trimiko Copeland.
I knew you were going to call me. Something that said she's going to call me. Watch, she's going to call me. First of all, I would like to say, I think we're all in agreement. Can we have a do-over? Because this 2 hours is just not enough. You've had a wealth of information and we just need a do-over. There's so many more questions and just your expertise is needed. And so I just want to let you know personally that I appreciate the time and the effort and the information that is shared. There's not just one question, because I can keep going. Like I said, it's almost 7 o'clock, and like you mentioned, everybody has to go, but can we get her back on the schedule, Sylvia? Like, come on. I just want to say thank you. I can go into collaboratives with more information. I know what to expect. I know what to bring to the table. I know what to look for. You gave a blueprint on information that we can use going forward. And I just personally want to thank you. That's all I have to share. Thank you. And please come back.
Thank you. So I do wish we had more time because I would love to hear from all of you. I'm dying to call on all of you actually, but we don't. And I want to say just in closing that I so value this opportunity to be here with all of you in this space. I'm grateful for the invitation to present, even though it was 2 hours and I know it goes by really quickly. But I do hope that it was valuable to you and that as you think about your collaboratives that you turn to one another and that you support one another so you can put these building blocks in place. And I'm only an email away. So if you get stuck anywhere and you're like, okay, you know, my collaborative's got these challenges, feel free to email me. That's totally fine. And so you can definitely I think my email is already available, but definitely feel free to do that if you feel like, oh, I would like to just chat with her about the collaboratives that I'm a part of or supporting. So
we will share your email, Laura, and even you know, we take notes throughout the academy, so we will share that with everybody. And I know that Tracy will also be, if she hasn't already, I believe she has, but there'll be a link where you're going to have access to the documents that we can share, but also any kind of, we have a Jamboard where you can go in there and give us any input. You know, like today we know we want to bring Laura back, but also just what's working, what's not, what would you like to see more of? So we'll go over that again next week in terms of what you have access to that, but we will definitely get as much information to everybody as we can.
And I just want to say in closing, I know we're right at the mark. Thank you, Laura, for your wonderful presentation today. Really enjoyed it, I guess, as everyone else did. And just so appreciate your time. Everyone who's on the cohort today, again, thank you so much for spending your Tuesday with us here. You're the first cohort, and so your presence here really means a lot, and that you're enjoying it is even better. So again, thank you so much. My colleague Stephanie did put that link in the chat, and so that is going to be a kind of a fluid live document. It's a folder on Google that you have access to, and you can check it out. It has a lot of things that you might have received via email or in your mailbox of the Policy Academy. It also has a Jamboard, as Sylvia mentioned, where you can place things. There'll be resources there for you. And so again, it's for your use to kind of interact with your fellow cohort members here. Finally, next week, we are going to have Congressman Mike Garcia of the 25th District speaking on decision making. So be sure that you attend. And as always, you'll get a email of the link the day before and a couple hours before. So again, thank you so much for attending. We so appreciate you, and see you next Tuesday. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful week.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, Dorothy.
Bye, everyone.
Have a
Bye,
great
Tessa.
week.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
night.
Thank you. Good night.
Oh, good night, Miss Dorothy.
I moved.
I don't think she wants